1975 London. A city of lights and shadows. In the quiet hallways of luxury apartments and the lonely paths of parks, a predator is moving. His name is Patrick Mackay. He is not like other killers. He does not hide his darkness, he embraces it. He calls himself a disciple of the devil. For months, he has been on a spree of violence that has left the police confused and the public terrified. He targets the weak, the elderly, and the lonely. But the most chilling part is that Mackay has been telling doctors for years that he was going to kill. No one listened. Now, the streets are running red. Welcome to the Well of Monsters. Today, we look into the mind of a man who turned his inner demons into a living nightmare. Patrick Mackay did not become a monster overnight. He was born into a world of pain and fear. Growing up in the 1950s, his father was a violent man who beat him regularly. Young Patrick learned early on that the only way to survive was through aggression. When his father died, something inside Patrick broke. Instead of feeling relief, he felt a void that he tried to fill with fire and cruelty. He began setting fires to buildings and torturing animals in his neighborhood. He was a boy who found joy in the suffering of things that could not fight back. By the time he was a teenager, Patrick was already a regular visitor to mental hospitals. He told the doctors very clearly that he had a desire to kill. He even walked into a police station once and admitted he was dangerous. But in those days, the system did not know what to do with a boy like him. He was released again and again. He was a ticking time bomb walking the streets of London. He spent his time drinking and obsessing over dark figures in history. He felt that the world had rejected him, so he decided to reject the world. He was looking for a reason to let his rage explode, and it wouldn't be long before the first victim felt the weight of his anger. The year was 1974 and Patrick Mackay was living a life of wandering. He had no steady job and no real friends. He spent his days riding the trains and buses of London, watching people. He was looking for someone easy to overpower. His first confirmed victim was an elderly woman named Isabella Griffiths. She was 87 years old and lived alone. Patrick tricked his way into her home, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Once inside, the polite mask vanished. He attacked her with a level of violence that shocked even the most experienced detectives later on. After the murder, Mackay did not run away immediately. He stayed in the apartment, looking through her things. He stole a few small items, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the power. He realized that taking a life made him feel like he was finally in control. The police found Isabella days later, but they had no clues. There was no connection between the quiet old lady and the drifting young man. This lack of a connection gave Mackay a sense of being invisible. He felt like he had been given a license to kill. He went back to the pubs and the streets, blending in, while the police searched for a phantom. The fire inside him was now a roaring flame. By March 1975, Mackay's violence reached a peak. He had befriended a local priest named Father Anthony Crean. The priest was a kind man who believed in forgiveness. He saw that Patrick was a troubled soul and tried to help him. He gave him food, money, and a place to talk. But Patrick did not want help. He wanted a victim. One afternoon, Mackay followed the priest to his home. He waited for the right moment and then he attacked. He used an axe he found in the house. It was a brutal, prolonged assault that left the small village of Dartford in total shock. The scene at the priest's house was horrific. Mackay had not just killed the man, he had destroyed the place. This was the turning point for Patrick. The death of the only person who had tried to help him showed that there was no mercy left in his heart. He felt a strange sense of peace after the murder. He believed he was following a dark destiny. He left the house and went back to London, but he left behind a trail of blood that would eventually lead the police to his door. For a few more weeks, however, he remained free, a disciple of chaos moving through the crowds, looking for his next opportunity to strike. After the murder of Father Crean, the police began a massive investigation. They started looking at everyone who had been in contact with the priest. Patrick Mackay's name came up almost immediately. He was known to the local officers as a troublemaker with a mental history. They began to track his movements across London. They realized that he was a man with no fixed address, which made him hard to catch. He moved between cheap hotels and the houses of people he met in bars. He was like a ghost in the urban jungle. Detectives began to link him to other unsolved crimes. They noticed a pattern of elderly victims who had been robbed and killed in their homes. They sent out alerts to all police stations in the city. Mackay was becoming the most wanted man in Britain. He knew they were closing in. He became more erratic, drinking heavily and talking to strangers about his dark beliefs. He was almost begging to be caught, yet he continued to look for one more victim. The tension in London was high. People were locking their doors and staying inside. The city was waiting for the moment when the disciple would finally be put in chains. In the end, it was a simple mistake that caught him. Police spotted Mackay in a public place and recognized him from the descriptions. He was taken to a secure station and placed in an interrogation room. At first, he was quiet, staring at the wall with cold, empty eyes. But then, he started to talk. And once he started, he couldn't stop. He began to list his crimes with a pride that terrified the officers in the room. He admitted to killing Isabella Griffiths and Father Crean. But then he started talking about others. He claimed to have killed up to 11 people. He described each one in detail, talking about how he felt and why he chose them. The police realized they were sitting across from a serial killer of a magnitude they hadn't seen in years. He called himself the disciple of the devil and said he was just doing what he was meant to do. The interrogation lasted for hours. The room was heavy with the weight of his confessions. The detectives had the man, but they now had a much bigger problem. They had to find the bodies and prove his wild stories were true. Finding the proof for Mackay's claims was a nightmare for the police. Many of the people he mentioned were homeless or had no family to report them missing. He described pushing people off bridges and into the River Thames. He talked about killing people in parks and then just walking away. Because there were no witnesses and the bodies were often gone or unidentified, the police could only charge him with 3 murders. This frustrated the families of those who suspected Mackay was responsible for their loved ones' disappearances. He told stories about a girl on a train and a man in a park. The police searched the river and the woods, but time had erased the evidence. Mackay seemed to enjoy the fact that he knew more than the police. He teased them with clues and then took them back. He was a master of psychological torture. To this day, the true number of Patrick Mackay's victims is a mystery. He is a man who took secrets to prison, secrets that still haunt the cold files of the London police. The trial of Patrick Mackay was a dark spectacle. He stood in the dock looking like an ordinary young man, but the words that came out of the witnesses' mouths painted a picture of a demon. Doctors testified about his long history of mental illness and how he had been failed by the system. They admitted that if he had been kept in a secure facility years ago, many people would still be alive. The courtroom was filled with the families of the victims, looking for answers that Mackay refused to give with any real remorse. Mackay himself was unpredictable in court. Sometimes he was silent, and other times he would have outbursts of anger. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The judge called him one of the most dangerous men he had ever seen. The sentence was a relief to the public, but it left many questions unanswered. Why was he released so many times? Why did no one listen to his warnings? The trial was not just about Mackay's crimes, it was a trial of a system that had allowed a predator to walk among the sheep for far too long. Patrick Mackay was sent to a high-security prison, where he has remained for decades. In prison, he has been a difficult and lonely figure. He has spent much of his time in isolation, away from other inmates who feared his reputation. He has written letters over the years, sometimes admitting to more crimes and sometimes saying he has changed. But the authorities have always been careful. They know that a man like Mackay is an expert at deception. He knows how to tell people what they want to hear. Mackay is now one of the longest-serving prisoners in the UK. Every few years, there are rumors that he might be released, and every time, the public reacts with anger. The families of the victims still fight to keep him behind bars. They believe that the disciple of the devil can never be truly rehabilitated. He remains a shadow from the past, a reminder of a time when London felt like a hunting ground. Inside the prison walls, Mackay is just another number, but to the world outside, he is a symbol of pure, unprovoked evil. Looking back at the case of Patrick Mackay, the most frustrating part is the lost opportunities. There were at least 10 times when Mackay could have been stopped. He had been diagnosed as a psychopathic personality at a young age. He had expressed a desire to murder people since he was 15 years old. Yet, because of a lack of beds in hospitals or a lack of communication between departments, he was always set free. The story of Patrick Mackay is a lesson in the importance of listening to the warning signs. He was a man who practically shouted that he was going to kill, but the world was too busy to notice. It led to changes in how mental health and criminal justice work together in the UK today. But for the victims of the 1970s, these changes came much too late. We have to ask ourselves, how many other Patrick Mackays are out there right now, telling us who they are while we look the other way? The failure of the system was just as responsible for the deaths as the man with the axe. Today, the name Patrick Mackay is not as famous as Jack the Ripper, but his crimes were just as terrifying. He was a product of a violent home and a broken system, but he also chose his path. He embraced the darkness and made it his identity. The parks are better lit and the police have better tools, but the human heart can still hide the same shadows that Mackay possessed. We remember the victims, Isabella, Father Crean, and the others whose names we might never know for sure. Their lives were cut short by a man who worshipped chaos. The story of the disciple of the devil is a reminder that we must protect the vulnerable and listen when someone tells us they are dangerous. Patrick Mackay remains in his cell, a man who traded his life for a spree of violence that achieved nothing but pain. When you walk the streets of London at night, remember that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who have been trying to tell us who they are all along. Subscribe, ring the bell, and thanks for watching. Don't forget. I'll see you at the bottom of the well.